Hey everyone, Ben Coomber Radio, episode number 245. Now, it's been a while since Rachel has been on the show. Rachel, hello!
Hello! I believe it was actually just before New Year that we spoke, I think.
We did, and we talked all about achieving more things in 2017.
We did, and we talked about being innovative and changing things if they don't work, but sticking to plans. But yeah, I do remember that was a good one.
Yeah, that was a very good episode. And if people got benefit from that episode, reach out, send us a tweet, say hello. We do like to hear from people. There's an awful lot of people listen to this show. It's very rare that you actually talk back to us. It is always appreciated to hear of people that benefit from this kind of stuff. So yeah, anyway, right. Well, we have got a very tight half an hour today. I'm not sure I've really got anything to talk about. I've had my head down in sorting out things that I want to sort for the rest of 2017. I've got a seminar tour all over the UK and Ireland coming for PTs, which is going to be called the Personal Training Development Series. It's all about developing you on a personal, business and professional level. I'm then going out to the Middle East to teach in Qatar, Bahrain and Dubai in April. And then looking ahead at the year from all the major events, we'll be having our own conference. I'll be at Body Power, I'll be at LIW, I will be at SFN, I'll be at Dubai Fitness Expo in October. It's already looking like a good year.
Wow, you are such a social butterfly.
I'm not going to be sociable. I'm going to turn up. No, I'm always sociable.
I know. It's funny. I looked at my calendar from last year, and my travel schedule looked a little bit like that. With I think I did like 4 or 5 trips to Australia last year. With David and I were back and forth to France with all this wedding stuff, and I've looked at my calendar this year, and I'm like, I've got one ski holiday / my brother's wedding at the end of March, and that's it. I literally have no other travel plans for the rest of the year, and it's actually giving me anxiety because I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? So maybe I should rephrase that as where am I going to go? This is really cool. So yes, we shall wait and see. Lots happening this year. So
definitely. And I have made a pact to myself that I will ensure I get my normal amount of holidays this year because I don't have anything planned. But I've got adventure in my bones. I need adventure this year, and I think I'm going to do a road trip all around Italy and Croatia in the summer. We want to hire like a bit of a camper van type thing and just visit incredible beaches, all sorts of stuff. And then of course I'm going to go skiing. That's standard. Can't not go skiing. But I don't know. I've got adventure in my bones. I want to be doing just a little bit more crazy shit.
Well, rather you than me, I have to say in my old age, I'm becoming more and more for the secure and safe, things in life.
No way. Throw me out of a plane, throw me in a river.
No way.
Like, whatever. Let's do it. Have you ever been
No
skydiving?
Way. Sorry?
Have you ever been skydiving?
Ben, how long have you known me?
Come on, it's the most incredible thing. Oh, it's incredible. People just have to do it. If you've never skydived.
I get my thrills going shopping, honey. I don't do skydiving.
Well, yeah, I don't get any thrills from shopping. That's why I look like a tramp.
And that's the difference between girls and guys. Anyway, should we get on with these questions?
Yeah, let's get on with the show.
Okay. So this first question is from Becca. Hi, Ben. I listen to your podcast pretty religiously at the moment, and I wondered if you and Rachel might be able to help. My training goals and activity have recently changed, and I'm trying to research how I should adapt my nutrition in order to fuel the best performance, only there doesn't seem to be too much evidence out there. I've just started within the past couple of months Ironman training under the guidance of a fantastic coach. Before beginning Ironman training, I was doing a lot of strength work and gaining a lot of muscle, also under the guidance of a great coach. I was tracking my macros, 45% carbs, 25% fat and 30% protein for muscle gain. I was previously a marathon endurance runner and quite petite and bordering underweight. My Ironman coach has now stopped me from lifting weights and would like me to lose the muscle that I built weight training, as obviously to be a speedy triathlete, there's no point in lugging extra muscle weight around. I have some pretty heavy training days and often burn hundreds of thousands of calories before work. I have a huge appetite. I've recently started thinking about how I should change up my macros for performance and try to lose some extra muscle, as well as probably a little bit of body fat. This sounds completely bizarre. What kind of person is aiming to lose all of the muscle that I worked so hard to build? My work is also pretty manual too, as I'm an equine vet, so I'm relatively active through the day. A long-winded way of saying it, but my main questions are, should I be changing up my macros to higher carbs, less protein to lose muscle, fat, and maintain performance? Or are there ways to gauge what I should eat on high volume training days, or should I just eat intuitively? I find I'm pretty hungry all of the time, and if left to my own devices, I could probably eat rather a substantial amount of calories in a day. I'm also vegetarian, although I do eat some fish. I've also struggled at times with 30% protein, and I do tend to add protein powders to porridge, etc. I'm approximately 5'3" and weigh 56.8 kilos. As a bit of a background, I feel like I'm in a pretty healthy place right now, weight-wise. When I was running a lot, I weighed more like 50 kilos. Although I feel I'm a lot leaner now than I was then, somewhere in the middle would probably suit me as an endurance triathlete. Thank you for your help. Sorry, that was pretty long-winded. I've also moved to Australia from the UK. Not that that makes too much of a difference. Kindest regards, Becca.
Another Aussie, eh?
No. They've stolen another one.
So there's a couple of things here. Now, if anyone that does want to lose muscle mass, and it's probably a very small amount of people, I would definitely like some more. Losing any more would probably make me cry. A low protein environment is going to be important. So only taking on board probably like the bare minimum for function. So we're probably looking at like the government's RDA of like 0.8 grams per kilo. And then I would be doing quite long duration cardio, which you're going to be doing anyway because of its catabolic effect on muscle tissue. So you combine a calorie deficit, low protein diet with endurance training, and over time you're going to lose muscle mass. The amount of muscle mass you lose will depend on your genetics, because some genetics will be better at holding on to it. I would probably lose it pretty quickly. Compare that to kind of an athlete who has, really strong genetic potential, and you can see that just by looking at them. Their body's going to do quite a good job of holding on to that. So I think that's your first question nailed. Now, I don't necessarily agree with your triathlon coach. I do not know, however, how muscly you are or what you look like and how quickly you move. I know plenty of bigger triathletes and runners. One of our body type nutrition coaches, Phil Patterson, he's a GB level triathlete. I'd say he's quite big for a triathlete. He's got massive legs. I have massive leg envy of that guy. I wouldn't say he's skinny up top, but he's slim, but he's definitely more muscled and he's a GB level triathlete. So I think you've got to ask your question, is the overall mass slowing you down? If you genuinely think, and there's obviously ways to test this, but if you think that when you were at 50 kilos, you were faster, you did move better, and you think it's more beneficial, then sure, lose some muscle, but I don't think it's going to be healthy. But saying that, I think from a selfish and personal level, you have to ask yourself if you want to lose muscle. Now, unless you're being a high-level competitive triathlete, I would say, let's say you lost 4 kilos of muscle mass. Let's say that enabled you to gain 100 places in a triathlon. From going to placing 200th to placing 100th, is that worth you going through all this effort to lose muscle mass, which will be quite uncomfortable? It's not going to be pleasant eating a diet like that and training like that. You're going to feel pretty crappy. Is that worth losing the muscle mass? If you're trying to be competitive, maybe. If not, I would probably say not. If someone said to me, Ben, I think you'd be faster in your rugby match if you lost 4 kilos of muscle, I wouldn't do it. Because I want those 4 kilos of muscle on a personal, aesthetic, purely selfish level. And because I'm not trying to break into the England squad, because I'm pants, there's no point. So I think for me, that's where I would kind of draw the line. I don't believe I think, I'm not that big a player when it comes to the rugby pitch, but I still want to play. It doesn't put me off. It could be better if I was bigger. I'd be able to hit harder and take the hits harder. But I think it comes down to you and what you want a little bit more, rather than your coach saying, I think you should do this.
I'm kind of of the same opinion of you, and it's really hard to go by kilos, right? Because somebody who's 5'3" at 56.8 kilos, if they're super well trained, they actually do have a lot of muscle mass on them, and they're quite lean. That's a very athletic build, and the coach may be right, but I'm also kind of erring on the side of, there are not many women that I see at that height and weight who also don't have fat to lose. And I'm just putting that out there. It might be that Becca's already very lean and very fit for sport, but there are a few things here. You said that you feel pretty healthy right now and you feel good weight wise. But one of the biggest things to me is that I like all of my girls to also have their hunger in check. This is something I learned from, Dr. Jade Teeter, and I know you've had Jade on the show. Such a legend. But he talks a lot about hunger, energy, and cravings. And when your hunger and energy and cravings are in check, generally speaking, your nutrition is on point. And I think sometimes with endurance athletes, they place way too much emphasis on carbohydrate intake, particularly being vegetarian. It would be something that I would perhaps look at and get a second opinion. And well, do I actually need to increase my protein intake and my fat intake for satiety and performance? Because when you're doing Ironman training, that's a long duration training. You're not just going to be burning carb sources, then you are also going to be tapping into obviously fat stores as well. So something to look at. I'm just kind of like throwing ideas out there. I'm obviously a massive advocate of strength training as well. It's really hard to say without, I guess, knowing a little bit more detail.
I think your coach's advice to completely stop strength training is also misguided. And that leads me to not put my full trust in the coach, because if you look at a lot of high-end athletes, so I'm going to take Phil Patterson, BTN coach, who I talked about a second ago, he's usually in the gym twice a week. He goes through training cycles in the year, like most athletes, where he's trying to accumulate and build some strength. He's then trying to rebalance, work on mobility, make sure he just keeps his body in check. And remember, a stronger muscle is able to produce more force. So, if you keep squatting, deadlifting, even if it's once a week, your ligaments are going to be stronger, your tendons, your muscles, your ability to push force, also your ability to just dig in on a different level, sit down in the saddle and really push, and weight training is going to help that. And then you've got the other side of it where you want to probably have a little bit more variety in your training. Like, I enjoy going to the gym. I'd probably never stop, even if I went once a week. So actually just having that session where you're not just out on the bike or in a pool, you might really enjoy that from a mental perspective. And I think that would be beneficial.
I wanted to add another thing now, with weight training, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be hypertrophy training. If somebody's doing Ironman training, like the rest of their training is going to be super high volume. So it may be that when you're actually in the gym, you do a lot of more low volume stuff. And with low volume, it doesn't necessarily need to be very heavy, but it's sometimes just the stimulus of lifting, which is enough to keep the strength in your muscle, not necessarily the size. And that's something to consider as well. So if you are, coming off the back of, let's just say Monday, you have a super high training day, you wouldn't then go into the gym and treat your strength training session as another cardio workout. And I'm going to do a bit of a video on this week. It's such a common theme that I see, that in women in particular, that they treat strength training and their weight training as a cardio workout. And it shouldn't be that way. Strength training is strength training. And cardio is cardio. And of course you can combine the two and do circuits and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is that, the idea behind strength training, particularly in fat loss, is to try and build as much muscle as you can. But coming back to this, it would be an idea to, stay in the gym, stay lifting, perhaps less volume. So instead of doing, 4 sets, you might just do 2 sets, and that's cool. And it might only be twice a week.
To visit your question about the macronutrients, I would probably keep your macronutrients the same. The only thing I would change, and this is lifted straight from a sports nutrition textbook, I would probably bring your protein down. I don't think you actually need as much as 30% because it sounds like you have a high calorie need. With that much training, you're probably taking on board at least 4,000 calories a day with being out on the bike or whatever for an hour and a half, 2.5 hours. So I'd probably take 5% of your protein and put it into fat and carbohydrates. Because remember, the more calories you eat, the less protein you need as a percentage. That percentage will not stay the same because we just don't have the need for protein to keep going up, up and up. And then your last question, should you just eat intuitively? I would say if you're going to do this low protein thing and lose muscle, then you're not going to be able to do it intuitively because I think you're going to burn out quickly. So you need to be on top of your calorie and macronutrient intake. Otherwise, if you go too quickly, it's going to end in tears. Ideally, with where you're at, it kind of sounds like you're a person that needs to be tracking their calorie intake because you just do a lot. It sounds like if you got yourself into a place where you were under recovering, you'd burn out quickly because you've got a physical job. It sounds like you're quite hands-on, you're with people, you're relied on. The last thing I'd want you to do is kind of burn out. And, you've had a hard day at work, you haven't eaten that much, you go out on the bike and you're planning to do a 2-hour ride. It's just not going to happen. You're really going to hit yourself into a hole. And then lastly, on the muscle mass thing, I pick up on Rachel's comment in that a lot of people still have a bit of body fat that they can lose. Now, this is definitely something that's probably more prevalent with the female body because female on the lower half tends to be a bit heavier. So bigger quads and hamstrings, bigger glutes. And if we look at that, because there's quite a bit of muscle and quite often a female has curvature, quite a high body fat percentage can look, quite a high body fat percentage can look lower than it is. So you might think you've got 26, 28, but actually it's 32, 34, 36 because you've got quite a lot of shape there and you've got quite a lot of muscle mass. It's like I can look quite good now at about 11, 12% body fat because I have more muscle mass. Whereas before I had to get to like 9, 10% body fat because I didn't have as much muscle mass. So the more muscle you have, the kind of better you'll look because the more shape that you've got. So maybe it's something to think about. You just stand there and go, actually, how much fat is on my lower half or maybe all over my body? And perhaps I could just lose some excess weight by losing a little bit more body fat.
I have nothing further to add on that one.
Right, question 2, Foxy.
Question 2, this is from Anonymous, so we don't know who this is from. Hey Ben, I've got a question for you and Rachel maybe next time she's on the show. I'm happy for you to answer it yourself. I would just like an answer from somebody that I trust. So I've been listening to a fair few podcasts on nutrition and training. The questions that I have are, I am 19, female, 5'4.5", and I weigh 41 kilos, and I'm currently trying to gain weight and put on muscle, and I'm actually being coached by BTN. I've been training since I was 14, but not necessarily heavy, but CrossFit and personal training from 14. And then I did CrossFit once a week, plus other sports like tennis and running, etc. for a while. From when I was about 17, I decided to start the Kayla Itstein's guides. I followed them and trained 6 times a week doing the guides, and then once a week personal training, and then once a week CrossFit, and I loved every minute of it. Also, do the odd run or spinning class when I don't want to or I can't do any of the above. Then I stopped the guides and I'm now at uni training twice a week with a PT and 5 times a week bodybuilding style workouts of 2 to 4 sets, 6 to 20 reps kind of thing, often with high intensity training finisher on the end. I'm back into CrossFit once a week at uni, and when I'm home, I CrossFit and gym. On to the questions. Sorry for the ramble. Does my training age mean that I can never really put on that much more muscle? I've heard that you can note that the longer that you train, the less muscle that you can put on. I don't go super heavy, but it feels heavy to me compared to people my age who compete. Just over body weight squats. For example, today I did 3 sets of 10 reps at 45 kilos and 1.5 body weight deadlift, 3 RM roughly. I was told by a family friend recently that if you build up lots of muscle when you're younger, when you're older, your skin will sag because it has to expand to allow all of the muscle to grow when you're older, and that it's bad for your joints and bones. I dismissed her as I love lifting weights, and I did all of the opposites from what she said because basically, is there any damage that I can be doing to my body training like this from such a young age? I asked you because I heard Rachel had a similar training life story. Thanks so much, Ben. Thanks for all of the info that you put out. I love being a training and nutrition geek at the moment. Okay, you go first.
So, I'm never a big fan of overriding the opinion of another coach. You said you're being coached by BTN. I obviously don't know who because you haven't said. So I would always say, go and ask your coach first, especially if it's a fellow BTN coach because it's my company. Regardless of that, regardless of that, you're training a lot. So I do hope your nutrition is in check because you're training kind of bodybuilding. I didn't know what the Kayla Istine guides were, so I checked it out.
She's an Australian. She's an Australian girl. I presume she's a trainer. But she basically started with these like bikini body guides, and they're just body weight training guides. And she absolutely took off. She's super successful. I think she's doing a great job of making training accessible to women all over the world. I think perhaps the issue is that people take it very seriously, and Kayla herself she's got a naturally very slim build, and I think a lot of girls get bought into the program because they think that it will end up looking like Kayla. Now, yes, you can lose weight from training like that. Of course, it's high intensity body weight training, but and when we're in an obesity epidemic, I think something like Kayla's guides or guides that you can purchase online are awesome because it gets people moving who might not otherwise be moving. But if you are training like that 6 days a week plus other stuff, it's too much and you can't sustain it and you will burn out. When I read this question, the first thing I got to the end and I was like, okay, so how do you train? What do you do? Because you're like a squirrel on speed. You're like jumping from one thing to the other. I don't know what you're actually doing, what your purpose is for training and what your training goals are. I'm confused. So that's what the Kayla Itzine's guides are. Bikini body training, bodyweight stuff.
I did get that from the website. There was a good few bikini beautiful bodies kicking around, far sexier than mine.
Okay.
So firstly, just make sure you're eating properly because you're training a lot. That's my first thing. Now, your training age is obviously a very good point. Can you build muscle if you are older in the tooth when it comes to the gym? It's just a yes and no question, and I know that's shit and you don't want to hear it, but it is like, if you've trained for a long time, chances are you'll find it harder to put on muscle. If you've trained for a long time poorly and not really pushed yourself, there's probably a bit more genetic potential there in the bank because you've just not really kind of adapted and pushed your body to kind of go there. You could have great genetics and you could just keep evolving. Like, there's going to be a rough genetic ceiling from everyone. Like, I think I'm about 20% away from my genetic ceiling when it comes to like muscle mass and strength. I just don't think I'm going to get much more beyond that without doing some crazy stuff. So yes and no. And then in terms of the stretch thing, the amount of muscle you're likely to put on is probably never going to be a problem. You're not going to grow that substantially. The bigger danger is body fat. Like, I used to be big. I used to be 5.5 stone over my body weight. And I've got some, I'll describe it as stretchy skin around my waist. So it is a bit stretchier. Now, if you are healthy and eat really well, there is far less likelihood of you getting any kind of stretchy skin. And I know Rachel can comment well on this because she's a lot more into skincare than I am. I'm a guy, so I moisturise when I get out the shower. I put on some lotion when it's dry. That's about it. But if you've got a good diet, you've got a high collagen content in your diet, then you're going to have stronger skin. The minerals are going to be there to support skin elasticity. So I personally wouldn't worry about it unless you are getting like bodybuilder big, and I mean steroid bodybuilder big. Otherwise, I just don't see there being an issue.
Oh, that was going to be my point. Like, I've not seen any natural girls who've got anything going on like that. And you know, even I would say, even as far as like, you know, a chick who chooses to be an assisted, or she takes gear, like I don't think you can get that big, you know. Guys maybe, but girls, you know, I've got some friends who are, you know, competitive elite level bodybuilders, and I'm talking like pro bodybuilders, women. Like, these chicks they've got muscle upon muscle upon muscle, but it's never going to be as big as a guy. And I think, you know, you don't grow that quickly. Even if, you know, you don't just go from being like my size to, you know, a bodybuilder size. It doesn't just happen over the course of a year. You know, this is years and years and years it takes. And even if you've got somebody at the peak of their bodybuilding game, it takes them years to get there. And that's a lot of time for the skin to adapt to that. So, you know, I have to say, we don't know, although the skin does become more lax in your older age. Like, we just need to look at Arnold and know that he has some loose skin on him, and he's not as muscular as he used to be, and neither is Sylvester Stallone, and he's also got a little bit of loose skin on him. But you know, these guys were in peak form. They were massive guys, and now they're a bit older. And so, you know, I like Ben said, I think the danger is that when you get fat very quickly and his skin can't keep up with it, then, and I think that's where we're in danger of losing skin elasticity.
I think drawing on a point that we kind of visited on the first question is, what is it that you want? Like, I can, like, when I get to 50, I'm going to look worse than I did at 40. The chances are. Like, my skin's going to age a bit. There's a certain amount I'm going to be able to do to combat that. But if I get, like, a slightly more saggy skin at 60 than I would if I didn't weight train, I'm probably still going to weight train because I'm going to have 20, 30 years where I look awesome. So I'm going to choose to look really good in my peak, because the chances are when I'm 50, I'm not going to be getting off my top that much. I'm not trying to impress anyone. Like, it's just not really poignant in that point in my life. So I'm going to focus on the now, about being young, about being jacked, about being, you know, enjoying it. And then just deal with it at 50 and just think, okay, they were the choices I made and I was happy with them, and I'm now going to be happy with the result of those choices that I was happy about making in the past.
Do you know, I was just thinking about that, and I was like, 50 seems such a long time away, but like, I'm going to be turning 50 in 17 years. Like, that, like, I'm closer to 50 than I am to like 1. Like, when I was 1. Like, that is scary, Ben. Like, you know, so when you say 50 now, like, because so many of my friends are in their, like, 40s, and, you know, and I'm like, 50's not that old anymore. And so, 17 years. Anyway, I digress. Like, so we should maybe, like, go for, like, the 70, 80 thing instead of, like, the, you know, the 50, 60 thing. Because it's closer than we think.
Yeah, because it's going to make you feel better, basically.
I know, thanks. You've only just turned 30, baby. Yeah. There was going to be something else I wanted to say here. Training age. I think, you know, when you start lifting when you're 14, you don't lift intentionally for hypertrophy, and you certainly don't lift at your peak. You barely even learn to contract your muscle at 14. You just learn to move, and you just learn to lift, and you learn maybe like good tackers. Even when you're 19, you know, even now, like, I'm 33, and, you know, I have Mark Coles is my coach. Every time I see Mark, like, I learn something new, and the more that I learn from him, and the better control that I have over my muscle, the more likely I am to grow. So I think when it comes to training age, you know, like you said, you can train poorly for a certain amount of time. Like, you know, I've never trained poorly. Like I always had good solid trainers, a good solid form, but you know, I know I've still got growth left, you know, for my delts and things like that. So, you know, I think it does come down to, particularly if you start from a young age, I think you still got a long way to go. And at 41 kilos, you got a lot of growing to do and a lot of eating to do.
That was a great point about, you start young, but you're just moving. Like, I didn't really, I started training at 18. I didn't really start kind of fully appreciating and pushing for hypertrophy probably until I was about 22, my second year of uni. And I kind of got into lifting big and stuff, being around rugby more. Before that, it was like, just, learning what a squat was and moving with it properly and trying to do some stuff. But the intention wasn't fully there.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Right, well, I hope that has helped everyone today. We are wrapping up. I mentioned this on my last podcast. It is now available for international purchase. How to Be an Awesome Personal Trainer has been written. It is now on Kindle, on Amazon. It is now on PDF form on mine and the Body Type Nutrition's website. It will be available internationally on softback very soon. We're not quite ready there yet. We haven't quite set it up. But otherwise, look, if you want to check out anything that I do, go to bencoomber.com. The shop's there. There's tons of books. This is something I haven't told you about before. I wrote a book called The Intermediate's Guide to Lifting. We've talked a lot about training today. That gives someone a 6-month plan of how to go from kind of like basic through intermediate stages of training and how to actually program that in the gym. It also talks about nutrition in it as well. I think that's only 20 quid. It's a Bible of information. Same with Rachel. Like, Rachel, you can tell people where to find you. You know, there's a lot of stuff on both our websites if you want to grab more info than you get on the podcast.
So for training and nutrition stuff, you can go to aestheticfox.com. And if you want sort of more mindset based, like, you know, if you're struggling with like binge eating and things like that, look at jointchaselife.com and click under the blog and you'll see free stuff under there. And so you can have a cheeky browse through all of that.
Awesome. So that's us wrapping it up. I've mentioned that there's some cool dates coming up in the UK. For all you listeners, it would be awesome to see more of you this year when I'm on the road. Whether you're a trainer and you come to one of my PT-focused events, whether you're just someone looking to get healthier and better, coming to one of the other events, keep abreast. If you want to know where this stuff is, I try and do my best on the podcast to tell people. I often forget because me and Rachel are just chatting the shit, shooting the shit. If you want to make sure you hear about everything, make sure you're on my email list, bencoomber.com. Click on the button that has loads of free stuff advertised on the right. That way you're going to guarantee that any launch that happens or date you'll hear about. But yeah, that's it from us.
Awesome. Ciao for me.
Thank you for being a great listener. Do interact with us online. We're here if you want help. If you want your question asked on the podcast, then email bencoomber@gmail.com with the subject line podcast, and it will get thrown into the podcast mix. Otherwise, I will see you next week. Stay awesome.